Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Marie Herman, and I'm the owner of MRH Enterprises, LLC. I am so happy to be here today to host the Executive Secretary Magazine AdminChat. I hope you're going to find the tips that I'll share with you today helpful. I do want to take a moment, though, and talk about the tips that you won't be hearing today. These are suggestions that I have heard when I have attended organizational sessions in the past, and it's pretty painfully obvious that those presenters were not administrative professionals. So I will not be telling you today to put your phone on Do Not Disturb. I think most admins don't really have that luxury. We have to answer not only our phones, but often our coworkers and bosses' phones. So that's just not an option to say, sorry, I don't feel like answering phones today. I will not be telling you to close your office door so you can work undisturbed. I recognize that many of us don't have office doors to close, so that would certainly make that a challenge. I won't be telling you to work on one thing at a time so it gets your complete focus. Even though I will say studies have shown multitasking is not efficient. It's definitely better not to multitask. But the reality is our jobs don't allow us to only work on one thing from beginning to end at a time. And then I will also not be telling you to give it to your assistant to complete. I will be sharing some tips on delegating today, but I recognize that most of us do not have assistants that we can hand things off to. Hello, we are the assistants. So those are the tips that you will not be hearing from me today. What will I be covering? Well, I'm going to discuss attitude, a little bit about the attitude that you can bring to the office and how you can actually approach your coworkers when you are overloaded. I'll talk about planning and structure, and also streamlining some of your tasks and technology. Now, I know not every tip is going to work for everyone, but I'm hoping you'll be able to glean the tips that are most applicable to you and start looking for ways to apply them in your own workday. There are ways that you can streamline your work. For starters, let's lose the all or nothing attitude. It doesn't necessarily have to be a no means a no to everything. You can say no to volunteering for projects more graciously by saying what you are willing to do. So no, I can't serve on that committee. However, I would be willing to make some reminder phone calls. That would be an example of how you can say no, but still offer to give a portion of your time if you have any available. Concentrate on completing tasks, not on completing projects. Projects can often feel overwhelming to us. Tasks can be broken down into very small portions, which can be completed in short bursts of time. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. Beware of perfectionism. Most routine work does not need to be done perfectly. Ask yourself if your effort is disproportionate to the value of the task. Will other more important projects be delayed as a result of what you're working on? Can you reduce the frequency or the level of detail of a certain task in order to try to save time when you're working on it? And recognize as well that you don't have to do it all at once. I am living in a house that has not had its guest room painted because my husband is insisting that we empty the room completely, shampoo the carpets, paint, etc., rather than just throwing something over the furniture and painting the walls. So he wants to wait until we have a completely free weekend or a 3-day weekend and spend our weekend doing that project. Want to guess how often this has caused some stress for us? The truth is, we're never going to get it painted if we wait for a 3-day weekend. We've got to find a way to get it done in parts. We don't have to do it all in one shot necessarily. And we certainly don't have to redo the entire room like one of those makeover shows, pulling everything out and shampooing the carpets and doing every last little detail. It would be sufficient just to throw some paint in a bucket and then paint it on the walls. Stop and think. This seems so obvious, and yet often we are pulled in so many directions and we are so under the gun for time, we don't actually follow the advice. So stop and think. If you find yourself muttering, there has got to be a better way, there probably is. I tell my students all the time, if they find themselves thinking there has got to be a better way to do this in Microsoft Office, chances are there probably is. Take a few minutes, Google the question, and see if there's a better way to do it. I've done this myself. I had to do a mail merge a long time ago, and it was a mail merge to emails. And I discovered that as soon as I hit that send, it was prompting me with an OK window for every single one of those emails being generated. Well, I wasn't going to sit there and hit OK 600 times because that was a mail merge to 600 emails. Instead, I said to myself, Marie, if this was one of your classes, you would tell your students to stop and go look it up. And that's exactly what I did myself. I went, I Googled it, and I actually discovered that this was a frustration for a lot of people out on the internet, and someone had taken the initiative to come up with a solution for it. They created a little tiny software that did nothing else but click OK on mail merges, so you didn't have to sit there and click OK, 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 OK. 600 times. Hallelujah. Thank goodness I followed my own advice. Take time at the end of the day to organize your next workday. Take 5 to 10 minutes at the end of your day. Look at what you've done that day. Look at what your priorities are going to be for the next day. Do what you can so that when you come in the morning, you are ready to hit it running right from the very beginning. Think about what kinds of things you can do as you go along to be more efficient. Organize your route for maximum efficiency. This covers not only your personal world of running errands out in the real world, but also your work world of running any kind of errands away from your desk. What I would do previously is have a folder that would have anything in it that, for instance, I needed to give to other people or to make copies of. And on the front of that folder, I would put brightly colored Post-it notes with one Post-it note per task that I wanted to do that involved being away from my desk. And that way, I had all those reminders with me. I just picked up the folder, and as I walked around the building, I could go in order for where I was going to go, and I would make sure I didn't forget something that involved me leaving my desk. So try to think about how you can organize your route for maximum efficiency if you're walking around the building or you're out running errands for your company. Establish your priorities. You are wasting your time when you spend it on something unimportant. So ask yourself often, what is the most important use of my time right now? What is the best way I could spend my time right now? Now, I recognize that inevitably some of your time will be wasted on activities that are beyond your control. Don't fret about it. Control what you can control, and you'll have more time to cope with what you can't control. I had a former boss who traveled all the time. And so he and I would talk on the phone every morning for a few minutes, and we established a priority list. And the list that he used involved stars. 4 stars meant must be done today. Nag me until I get this done. I have got to get this done today. 3 stars meant it needs to be done this week. And so each day we would review what needed to be moved up from the 3-star list to the 4-star list. 2 stars, due sometime this month. So it's not really time sensitive, but it's something that he does want to get done. 1 star meant it wouldn't really matter if he never did it. And he would periodically go through that 1-star list in particular to see if there were things that had been what we called overcome by events, meaning things no longer applied. Maybe a date had passed that made something irrelevant, or maybe circumstances had changed, but for whatever reason, it didn't even need to be on the list anymore. We were never going to do it. It's so important to have some kind of a master list of the tasks that you want to do, and then to be able to prioritize those tasks using whatever system you want, ABC, 1, 2, 3, whatever the system is, but make it something where you have a system in place that lets you know exactly what all you need to do and has it prioritized so that you'll be doing it in the right order. Stephen Covey, the world-famous author, has a quadrant that he uses that talks about what it is important and not important to spend your time on. So it's a time management quadrant. And the quadrant number 1 in this top left corner is important and urgent. These are the activities that are critical, deadlines, crises, other do-it-now type of tasks. Nobody can afford to sit on those activities. They are a matter of daily survival. They have to get attended to that day. They don't necessarily get fixed every day, and they can put an enormous drain on your energy and your resources. If you are constantly putting out fires, you're constantly in stress. You're spending all your time in quadrant 1. Quadrant 2 is important and not urgent. These activities are important, but they're not necessarily time sensitive. That's things like strategic planning to prepare ahead for your future trips. Quadrant 3 is urgent and not important. These are the things that suck away our time. Phone calls, meetings, email, chores, interruptions. They're urgent, but they're not necessarily important. And very often they mean that our priorities are being established by other people. So you're pretty much constantly in a reaction process with this quadrant. Quadrant 4 is not urgent and not important. These are the activities that are kind of routine, like mail. In our personal life, it might be watching TV, procrastination. It's things that you are doing to somewhat get away from things. Stephen Covey recommends that we should spend the most time in quadrant 2, the important and not urgent category. And the reason for that is that the more time we can spend in quadrant 2, the less time we'll have to spend in quadrant 1, because many of the emergencies that come up at the last minute could have actually been avoided with advanced planning and with sitting down and looking ahead to what was coming on the horizon. If you have a boss that is constantly putting out fires, that is constantly coming to you and saying, drop everything, this is the priority for this minute, let's try to get them to step back a little farther, look a little farther ahead, and say at least not just what's coming today, but what's coming tomorrow, what's coming this week, that maybe we could address ahead of time to cut down on those things that come up that absolutely positively must be done today. Advanced planning works out in a lot of different ways. One is that when you're writing up your to-do list, write down tasks, which are single steps, not projects, which are series of steps. Break your projects down into manageable tasks. If you're organizing a holiday party, that's a project. That is not a task. And that involves multiple steps. Putting together the invitation list, putting together the invitations, or getting a venue, choosing a date, all of those kinds of things, getting your caterers, getting your entertainment, all of that are comprised of tasks. Break your list down into the individual tasks. Things that if you do one action, you can check that item off your list. If it involves multiple actions, it's too big and you need to break it down farther. You can create checklists and forms for things that you do often. So for example, new employee orientation forms or routing lists. You can save a lot of time by creating master checklists and forms for yourself. And those templates can be customized on a case-by-case basis. Examples of some of the forms that I've created, I had checklists for travel, where I would mark down all the different steps of the travel to make sure that nothing was slipped, such as registering for conferences, ordering the airfare, ordering the ground transportation, making sure there was a shuttle to the hotel, whatever the items were. It was in a nice, simple spreadsheet or checklist. This made it so much easier to catch all the details. If you're juggling a million projects, it's way too easy for one project to slip through the cracks. Using checklists, using these kinds of forms and logs to track things for yourself can save you a lot of heartache. Now, on the other hand, don't be too efficient. Why doesn't McDonald's cook and assemble 3 days worth of Egg McMuffins at one time? It would certainly be more efficient. Well, clearly the quality would suffer. Who wants to have a 3-day-old Egg McMuffin? So don't take efficiency shortcuts that would cause your quality to fail. The other reason you sometimes don't want to be too efficient. Perhaps you have a boss like I've had in the past that would change travel arrangements 25 times before finally deciding what was needed. Change the inbound, change the outbound, decide they want to stay at a different hotel. sometimes we end up hurting ourselves when we finish things too quickly. So if we could just hold off for a little bit with those kind of bosses, give them a chance to go through a couple of iterations, as long as we're not cutting it so close that the prices are going to go up or a hotel will be sold out. But if there's some things that we can kind of hold off with because we know that that's the boss that always changes their mind, we can save ourselves a lot of extra work on the back end. De-stress. Make sure that you are actually taking a break once in a while. That might seem counterintuitive for working more effectively, but it is actually so critical. You need to get up and go for a brief walk, maybe once an hour. Stretch regularly to clear your head and prevent eye strain from using the computer. One of the recommendations that's out there from an ergonomic perspective is that every 20 minutes, you should take your eyes away from the computer and focus on something 20 feet away, which is probably 7-8 meters away. You need to have something to move your eyes away from that computer monitor, and you should do it for 20 seconds. So 20 feet every 20 minutes for 20 seconds. And the goal of that is to kind of reset your eyes. When you stare at a computer for too long, you tend to stop blinking, especially if you're really focused. Your eyes get dry. That'll lead to headaches. Your neck, your shoulders, your back are going to get stiff. Do what you can to exercise, even if it's sitting at your desk and doing a couple of stretches, but standing up, walking around every so often will give you kind of a fresh wind for going back to the work. It is really important to take breaks. Don't work through your lunch hour every day. Don't take your lunch at your desk every day. Get up, get away from the desk, give your mind a chance to get clear, and come back with a fresh, new mood when you come back from lunch. Reduce the drop-by visitors. Administrative professionals are often sitting out in the open. People are often walking by, and they might have a tendency to stop and chit-chat with us. Maybe they're waiting for our boss, and so they stop and talk to us while they're waiting for the boss. If we have a candy jar at our desk, that's a biggie. They stop and get a piece of candy, a piece of chocolate, and they feel like it would be rude not to say something to you while they're doing it. So they stand there and they chit-chat with us. And before you know it, 15, 20 minutes have passed and you've gotten nothing done because you have some chatty patty trying to keep you company. So do what you can to reduce the drop-by visitors. If you have a candy jar at your desk, move it down so it's out of sight of people walking by. Or if it's for people walking by, put it in a more public location, like on a table in a reception area or out in an open counter area, somewhere that it's not right by your desk, even though it may be within eyesight, so you can still keep an eye on it. Consider adding a visual or a noise buffer to your desk, especially if you're near like a water cooler or a copy machine. A strategically placed partition, maybe a big file cabinet, a potted plant can kind of shield you. If that's not an option, maybe you can turn your desk at an angle to avoid eye contact with the people that are just walking down the hall. If they don't make eye contact with you, they'll be less likely to just stop and chit-chat. Now, obviously, you want them to be able to stop and talk if they have something they need to talk to you about. You just want to try to discourage the casual ones that didn't intend to come see you, but saw you and, hey, look at that, I'll stop and chit-chat for a bit. If it's an option, replace or remove a comfortable guest chair. Now, that's assuming you're not in a reception area where you have to have a guest chair. But if you want to discourage people from standing by, make them stand and not sit when they're chatting with you. Try to save your boss time where you can. And one of the best ways that you can save you and your boss time is to schedule a regular meeting time for you on your boss's calendar. Whatever time increment you want, if it's daily, if it's weekly, but you need to be on your boss's calendar. And I know that you remove yourself whenever a conflict arises. You always make yourself last for getting time with your boss, and that's not right. You need to make your relationship with your boss a priority, and your boss needs to feel the same way. So it's not just on you, it's on your boss as well. Whether it's a face-to-face meeting or a phone call, spend at least a few minutes together regularly to discuss what's happening that day, what's on the horizon, what travel's coming up, what are the problems you're experiencing, do they have their receipts from the last trip so you can put their expense report in. Keep a running list on your computer of questions for your boss and save it for this conversation. Things they need to know, things they need to do, things you're waiting on from them, updates on things they've asked you to do. Train your boss to make this a habit that cannot be broken. And make it an actual appointment on the calendar, not an informal catch me when you see me meeting. We all know those meetings tend to never happen. Regularly review routing lists to ensure that the boss should still be receiving these materials. Sometimes their responsibilities change. They're not doing things they were doing previously, but they're still on the same mailing lists. Excuse me. Get them off those lists where you can. Highlight or summarize the important points in articles. If your boss gets a lot of newsletters or magazines, go through and highlight the important points from any significant articles. Flag them with a Post-it flag so that they stand out and your boss doesn't have to spend as much time flipping through those periodicals. Delegating. Oh, I know, the D word. You may say, I can't delegate. I can't give it to a coworker. Sometimes we're afraid to delegate to our coworkers because, for one thing, they might delegate more work back to us. Or maybe you're concerned that they're going to gossip about you not doing your job. It's a risk. It's true. If you're going to delegate to other people, it is a risk, but it can be so worthwhile. Now, there's delegation that is true delegation of you report to me and I have the right to delegate to you. And that's one thing. A lot of admins don't have that luxury. So what do you have? Well, you may have coworkers that you can partner with, coworkers who are willing to help you and you help them whenever you're overloaded. Explore those opportunities, see what's out there. But there's some things to think about when you're delegating. And what I also consider delegating is when you can get coworkers to do things for themselves that really would save more time if they would just do it themselves. So one example, don't automatically do it. Meaning, take the opportunity to teach others how to do things themselves. And I always say it as, in case I'm not around. So for instance, how to refill the paper in the copy machine. It is a lot faster if they can figure out all they have to do is slide out the drawer, unwrap the ream, and pop it in the drawer, rather than walking all the way over to your desk and asking you to go over to refill the paper. So teach your coworkers how to do it so that they can do it on their own. How to clear a paper jam, where to find replacement office supplies. Now, you have to balance that with freeing up your executive to spend time on higher value things, which is what they're being paid for. But your time has value too. So look for those things where they are not literally walking past the copier to come over and ask you to make a copy. At some point, that's being ridiculous. In general, make life as easy as possible to help others help themselves. Print out step-by-step instructions for common routine tasks and have those instructions in multiple logical places if necessary. So as an example, I used to have a checklist right next to the copy machine for how to scan a document. Literally step-by-step instructions. Here's how to send yourself a document scanned from the copier to your email. Have a list of those kinds of step-by-step instructions so that they can go through the steps themselves. Very often, people are okay with it as long as it doesn't seem hugely complicated. They just need instruction. Let people help. If they offer assistance, in the back of your mind, always have a list of ideas ready for quick projects that don't need much explaining or quick tasks. Examples would be if they stop by and say, hey, do you need anything? Yeah, could you take these envelopes and drop them in the mail for me? Could you take this and drop it off at accounting for me? If people stop by and ask something like that, take advantage of it, say yes, and always have something in mind that you could hand off to them that would save you a little bit of time. Save reading time. Divide the reading of periodicals among your work group. Readers can flag important items, so when the periodical is circulated, important items can be found quickly. If you have multiple administrative professionals in your department or company, set up a system to be able to ask each other for assistance. You want to try as much as possible to create that sense of teamwork in the office. And you should also have a system for preventing abuse, because it's true, sometimes people will abuse that system. But when you have trust and good coworkers, it's amazing what you can accomplish if you work together rather than everyone working individually. Organization and reorganizing. One of the old school tactics, use tickler files. They're still valuable. Whether you're doing them electronically or you're doing them manually with paper, tickler files still have a place. This is where you would have the green hanging folders, and you'd have 31 of them marked with the days of the month 1 through 31. And then you'd have another 12 folders marked with the months of the year, January, February, March, etc. You can do this electronically. You can do this on paper, as I said, either way. But the point of this is to have a place designated to remind you of upcoming actions and events that you need to handle that you don't need to handle today. So you need to have some way of having a reminder pop up for yourself that on April 15th, I need to pay my taxes, that on April 16th, I need to send this document into accounting. On April 21st, I need to reserve the limo for my boss's trip. Whatever this task is, it can be part of your to-do list with flags and reminders, or it can be in the nice old-fashioned tickler file. It definitely can work either way. The most important thing, regardless of whether it's paper or electronic, is that it becomes a habit. You have got to get in the habit of checking it every single day. Do I have anything I'm supposed to do today? Do I have anything I'm supposed to do today? Group and conquer. So try as much as you can to consolidate and benefit multiple times. Examples on the personal front would be cooking a double batch of your dinner and then putting half in the freezer. But in the workplace too, do all your copying at one time. Save yourself steps by consolidating multiple projects where you can. Make all your phone calls at one time rather than divvying them out throughout the day. As much as you can, group your items together and process them all at once. Name your documents wisely. Think about how you're going to need to find that information later and how you're likely to use it later. And that'll help you in coming up with logical document structures. And if you can be consistent with your document naming, for example, if you name your files with a date starting with the year, so 2018-04-06, and then the name of the file versus April 2018, that's going to make a difference in the sort by name feature. That's going to have replication, that's going to have implications in other places. So think ahead of time about the projects, how you're naming your folders, how you're naming your files. If you are looking for example, expense reports, do you want them to be by person and then underneath that with a folder of expense reports and trips? Or do you want to have all your expense reports together regardless of which traveler it is and divide them out by date? You decide what's the best system for you, but if you have a good system set up, it also makes it easier to archive those files at the end of the year. You can transfer them all over to a CD and be able to find things logically in the future. That won't work if you haven't set up a good internal structure with your documents. Debrief after projects to capture what went well, what to improve, key contact information, and timelines. So if you have a large project or event, afterwards, make sure that every single time you are meeting for a debriefing session where you discuss, what did we do really well? What could we have improved? What do we wish we had done differently? Capture all those notes. Include any checklists or forms that you created and write down where those are so you'll be able to find them in the future. It makes life so much easier on future projects if you have the notes from the past projects with things like the floor plan layout. You can do projects in your sleep almost after you've done them a few times if you have good debriefing notes and you're not starting from ground zero every single year. Create a desk manual for cross-training and reference for people that are covering your desk when you're out. You may be surprised how often you actually access this yourself as well, because it will be containing useful and well-organized information. Julie Perrine, of All Things Admin, is a fellow speaker who has a great program on putting together your own desk manual. So go and check her out. She's got some great resources. Multitasking, combining tasks. Always have 5-minute tasks with you. So think ahead of what do I have that I could work on this week that I would like to get done. And it's just going to take like 5 minutes here and there. And if you always have something in mind, then if you're unexpectedly arriving at a meeting early and nobody else is there yet, you've got 5 minutes just sitting in the empty conference room to yourself, you would have materials with you to get some things done. And so some examples of this, and I do this a lot for personal things, but it works for work as well. Let's say you say, I want to write thank you notes to people. So stick some note cards and stamps in your portfolio that you carry with you with the pad of paper and the pen. And that way you'll have them with you anytime. If you end up with 5 minutes, write a thank you note to someone that you've been meaning to send. In my case, I often will sit and write down articles, ideas, magazine articles that I want to write. And so I'll list down different ideas for topics that I have for magazine articles or for webinars that I want to teach. That's a really good use of 5 minutes of unexpected time. And all I need is a pad of paper and a pencil. And then look for the little things like I clean trash out of my car while I'm filling up my gas tank. You know, you've got those few minutes. It's something really quick to do. Plan ahead for what kinds of things you can do like that. And if you get in the habit of having some of the materials with you, like a pad of paper, like a thing of note cards and stamps and envelopes, you'll be ready to go anytime. And if you get those few spare minutes, you knock out one of those little projects on your list. Sneak in professional development wherever you can. Try to listen to CDs or MP3s of an educational or motivational nature while you're driving to work, or maybe you're sitting on the train commuting. Do what you can to get some development in there periodically. I mentioned the waiting in lines. Another thing I do was almost always I have a magazine or a newsletter of some kind with me. You could have educational materials like an article on how to do something with mail merges, for instance, or how to do something with pivot tables in Excel. Have it with you. And then if you get those 5 spare minutes, you've got reading material that's educational as well. Print out a sheet of address labels when you send regular packages. If there's someone that you regularly send an envelope or a package to, and you have to print out a label for them, you might as well go ahead and print out a whole sheet of address labels for them, or at least a half a sheet, something that will cover you for several months. It's one less thing you're going to have to do in the future when you're sending something out regularly. In the same way, if you are regularly telling people to send you something, why not put, a dozen or 2 dozen self-addressed stamped envelopes in your purse or in that portfolio you're carrying with that pad of paper and pen. And that way, if somebody needs to send you something, you can literally hand the envelope over to them. It's going to serve as a reminder to them that they're supposed to get something to you, and it makes it easy on them. Assembly line. Think about where you can create assembly lines, meaning pre-assemble things that you use regularly. One example would be a new employee where you have an orientation and we always give them, these forms, and we make sure that they get these things. They're, a form to get a key and ID or key or a security badge, a form for signing up for their travel profile, for instance. All those kinds of things that every new employee needs. We'll put together an electronic package of a new employee orientation folder so that, boom, you just point them to the directory if it's an intranet site, or you have a USB to hand over to them, however you want to do it. Or you print out all the documents if they have to be hand printed and signed anyway, depending on how your company is set up with that. But everything is all together in one list. Perfect for that, to have a checklist to go with it. So you check off each form as you complete it. That's an example of an assembly line of packages you're going to use over and over again. It's the same thing with every new employee that starts. Another example, visitors. Create the electronic packages of things that visitors would need if they come to visit you, like local hotels, the restaurants, the map of the area, driving directions from the airport. Store all those documents together in one folder so they're easy to attach to an outgoing email, or set it up on a website where you can just give them the URL and they will go and be able to get all the information they need. Easy peasy. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time. Experts claim that 80% of files are never looked at again once they go into a file cabinet. Now, I don't know if that statistic is accurate or not, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was, because based on my own experience, I know that a huge percentage of the files that I put into the file cabinet never see the light of day again. So ask yourself these questions before you start filing. When did I last use this? Do I really need to keep this document? When will I need it again? Does this paper have a legal or a tax purpose where I am actually required to keep it? How hard would it be to find it somewhere else? And will keeping this document make my life any better? And one of the things I particularly think about is, am I really the master of this document? In other words, if it's a document that is involved with HR, for instance, or payroll or something else, they're really the master keepers of that document. Mine might just be a copy. And I probably don't need to keep a copy if I can go and get the original from the master at any time. So give some thought to that as well, whether or not your copy is considered the master copy, or if it's just a copy of a document that someone else maintains. Anything you can do to reduce the amount of paper going into the files will help you on the back end that you're never going to need to go through and make a determination that it needs to be disposed of. Some tips for filing. Try to make filing fun. Look for ways to make it a little more interesting, because let's face it, filing is not most people's favorite thing to do. There's a few of you out there that are a little oddball that really enjoy it. You find it relaxing, but let's face it, most people, not their favorite way to spend their time. They put off filing till they have absolutely nothing else to do because it's not fun. Well, you can make it a little more fun. How about hiding some instant lottery tickets in random places between your files? You only have to file till you come to the next ticket, or you only have to file until maybe a Post-it note that you've put in there. Something to give yourself a little bit of incentive. Who knows? Maybe you'll never have to file again if your ticket wins. Think about rewarding yourself, maybe with something small. If I finish all this filing today, I'm going to reward myself with a blizzard from Dairy Queen or some other treat. Think about what you can do to reward yourself with something small when you do key milestones on a big project, and especially a big project like filing that may not be quite as fun. Try not to let your 2 file papers pile up too much. If you want to have a folder on your desk of 2 file, and when that little manila folder gets full, that's when you file, that's fine. That's not too many to do. But if you have a tendency to let the papers pile up and all of a sudden you've got a foot or 2 feet of filing to do, then it really is easy to procrastinate on. So as much as possible, try not to let the papers pile up too high in the first place. Set aside a certain amount of time a day to work on catching up on your filing, even if it's 15 minutes a day. And I would also encourage you to set up time to declutter your files as well. Don't just put in, take out as well. You'll be surprised how fast it actually goes when you get started. The hardest part is definitely getting started. And use color coding or some other tool to differentiate your files. Have some way to kind of make them more interesting to you, easier to work with, but in the case of color coding, also easier to prevent errors. Purging files. Are you nervous about throwing out files? Well, you could think about creating a 2-step trash system. It's the equivalent online of the recycle bin in Windows. It is important to declutter, but if you're not quite ready to let go of it yet, put it in a selected spot. Maybe it's a box, and write the date on the box, that if that date comes, then and you haven't gotten anything out of that box, you can get rid of all the contents of that box. Pick whatever period of time is comfortable for you. Try to purge when you're adding new papers to a file. If you open up a file to put papers in, take a quick flip through and see if there's anything in that file that can be tossed as long as you've got it out anyway. Write destroy dates, which is the date when the file is no longer needed, on the documents that you file, on the file folders. Then you can just flip through the folders and look for those dates. Any date that's, we're past that date. Okay, it's all right to toss this now. Create some kind of a procedure for removal of old files. I tended to do this somewhere around Christmas time. The office was quieter, and there's something about that January new filing system kind of feel that I was more willing to purge at that time of year. And don't forget your computer files as well. We need to purge the electronic files too, not just the paper files. And that includes your email. Set time to go through your emails. If you've got 15,000 emails in your inbox, there is no way you can know which one of those emails is most critical and needs to be worked on today. Nobody can. Something is clearly going to slip through the cracks when you have that many emails in your inbox. One of the things that I did that might work for you a while back, because I will freely confess I am a reformed inbox hoarder. I had 30,000 emails in my inbox, and I recognized that this was not really a smart way to run my day. There's just no way I could keep up on those. And so what I did is I actually created a separate folder called To Read, and then underneath that To Read folder, I created folders by year. So say I had 5 years worth of emails, it would be 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 6 years. Excuse me. And then what I did is I transferred over from the inbox all of those emails into the appropriate year. I went through the current year, so that would be 2018 in this case. I went through those first, and I made a decision on every email that I came to. It either got deleted or it got put into a to-do folder, which was only things that really required action from me, or it went into an appropriate subfolder in my inbox where I organized them all by the various projects and whatnot. I processed every single email, and it was a touch once, do it, move on. I did the current year first, and then I actually went back and I started from the oldest year. So say 2013 in my earlier example. And the advantage of doing that is that the older stuff, you haven't touched it for 5 years. There's a pretty good chance all you're going to need to do is read it and delete. And very often I was able to see patterns of things. Like, let's say, for instance, you're on the mailing list for your office supply company. Well, you can select all of those emails and just delete them because you don't need to see the old sale flyers that they sent out from 5 years ago. Notices from LinkedIn that somebody wants to friend me or that somebody posted an update. I can just select all of those and delete them. So I could organize them. I would sort them by from, and a lot of times I could literally just go through and delete a couple hundred at a time. And I worked my way through all those emails. And when you do that in a focused way and you make a decision on every one of them that it's either going to go into my to-do if there's something I need to do now on it, or it's going to go into one of these organized subfolders so that I can find it later and be able to really work with it nicely. It is such a release for you. It is such a burden off your shoulders because whether you think about it or not, whether you realize it or not, having 15,000 emails in your inbox is overwhelming and it is a burden. And so you will save yourself a lot of mental energy if you go through those emails, get them organized, reduce down the numbers. There's also another tip in Microsoft Outlook that there is what's called a cleanup conversations tool. And if you're not familiar with it, go and look it up. Make that your first Google after this webinar. And it allows you to remove redundant emails. So if I write an email to you, you reply back to me, and then I reply back to you. My second email contains your reply and the original email. The Cleanup Conversations tool will remove those two earlier emails and say all you need is the last one that has all the other emails contained within it. And so that will knock down quite a bit of your inbox's right there. Set up rules so that incoming emails are automatically put into the correct folders as much as you can. There's a lot of things you can do in Outlook to better control your inbox. All of which comes down to learn your software in depth, not just Outlook, all the Office software that you work with every day, whatever the program is. Learn how to customize it, learn about the navigation shortcuts, the keyboard shortcuts, research the time-saving features and the advanced features. So using Microsoft Office as an example, that's going to include things like auto text and styles and macros and mail merges and forms and filters and auto format and conditional formatting and data validation and custom views and pivot tables. That's just a couple of the time-saving features built into Microsoft Office. And if you're not using them, I guarantee you are spending more time working on tasks than you should. Learn your software in depth. Make the time to do it. Now, whether you do that by watching YouTube videos or buying a book or signing up for one of my study groups or some other study group that's out there, do what you can to learn Microsoft Office and other software that you use in depth. Take the time to do that. Most of us only learn enough to do our jobs. And so we may say we know the program, we've worked with it 10 years, but in reality, we only know how to do the tasks that we use on a daily basis. And a lot of us have never gone beyond that to figure out what else is out there that could potentially save us time and effort. Use your email more effectively. So create groups for people that you email regularly, and then check those groups periodically to make sure they're still accurate. Are there people that have left the company that you still have, or have switched to a different department that you still have in your groups? Are there people that have come that you need to add to your groups? So make sure you watch those for accuracy over time. Learn what your boss's text page address is so that you can send text messages from your email program. All you need to do generally is send it to the right address. There's an equivalent email address to every text message. And so that means you can type it up at your keyboard instead of from your phone. Use specific subject headers in all the email that you send. Try to have something like agenda for April 3rd staff meeting as your subject line, rather than something really vague like agenda or quick question, don't forget. Those kinds of things are absolutely useless later. Have a good subject line up front, and it will help you long term in being faster and more efficient in answering emails and other people getting back to you. If you do get a message with an ambiguous subject line, many email programs allow you to be able to change it to something more useful. So edit your subject lines when you get them, if necessary, to make it a more useful subject line. Use folders to organize your email. Separate out items like reference that you'll be keeping permanently and passwords or things like that. I create folders for tracking items. So for example, if I have purchase orders, I might have one folder for purchase order, need to get a PO number, purchase order, PO number received but order not placed yet, PO order placed but not received yet, and then a fourth one for PO received. And as I'm processing them, I can transfer them into the appropriate folders, and I know at a glance exactly what status each one of those emails is in and each one of those POs as that example. You could create separate folders for clients or projects or events, whatever works for you and your workplace. But do create a folder structure that is logical and that allows you to know exactly where your messages are whenever you need them. Flag your messages for follow-up. Just right mouse click on the message and choose flag or follow-up depending on your program. Be sure to assign a date to the follow-up so that a reminder message will pop up. Utilize search folders to find, read, and organize your email. Outlook has a feature called search folders. If you have a search that you regularly run, save it as a search folder, and all you'll have to do is click on that folder and it will show you the updated list of any emails that apply to that search. Just as an example, Outlook has one built in. You might not realize it's a search folder, but it is, and it's for your unread email so that you can see just the messages that you haven't read yet. That's an example of a search folder, but you can create your own custom search folders. Your inbox should be an extension of your to-do list. So only emails that require action should remain in your inbox. If they don't require action, they should be moved over into the appropriate subfolders or deleted. If you do that, you will stay on top of your most critical action items. Identify your time pitfalls and then conquer them. Think about keeping a log for, say, 1 to 2 weeks, marking every interruption with just a brief note or a category if possible. And then at the end of that period of time, go back and look at them and identify what were my time pitfalls, what were kind of the broad categories of what prevented me from getting things done that I wanted to get done and the priorities that I had. And what can I do so that going forward, these things don't mess up my schedule anymore. They don't blow my whole day. So examples, I'm too busy, no time to think, computer games or internet surfing, Facebook, social media. Crises, emergencies came up, email to family or friends, spam, ineffective meetings, lack of team communication, outdated technology, poor organization or planning, procrastination, unnecessary phone calls and drop-in visits, or unstated or unclear priorities or objectives. So once you've identified these categories, then think about what can I do to address them? An example would be if Facebook is your nemesis and you're spending way more time on there than you should, and you know that you shouldn't be doing it, but you are, there's websites out there like Focus Me as an example that allow you to take a website URL, put it in the free app that you can download or the desktop site, and then tell it, I'm allowed to have 30 minutes a day on this site, whatever the amount is you pick. And at the end of that time, it'll lock it down and it won't let you go to that site. That's an extreme example. I'm sure most of you are not using Facebook at work, but the concept is the same. Think about what your particular time pitfall is and what you can do to address it. If it is email from family and friends during the day and that's interfering with you, set up a rule in your email to put those in a separate folder and only check that folder once a day. If it's the poor organization and poor planning, sit down and start planning things out ahead of time and creating those checklists for yourself so that you will have time going forward to get things done. Just think about whatever your particular obstacle is and what you can do to work around it. And if the first idea doesn't work, brainstorm for other ideas. There's multiple ways to address every one of these time pitfalls. Just do it. If it takes you longer to think, I've got to do that sometime, than to just do it, just do it. For me, it's things like going down to my basement at home and getting something that I've run out of upstairs. I sort of have a mental note of, I've got to do that. I've got to get a new box of Kleenexes the next time I go downstairs. Well, sometimes if you just did it, it would save so much time. It's just as fast as it takes the time to say, I've got to do that. And so for myself, I have a rule for myself. If I find myself saying something for a third time, I've got to do that sometime, I stop and do it immediately. So for example, if it's to put away a box, for instance, I come home, I put a box on the counter, I'm going to put it away later. If I find myself saying, I've got to remember to put that away, third time, stop, do it right now. Come on, you're being ridiculous. Or at least schedule time on the calendar for whatever the task is. Make time to learn those new software features. I talked about that earlier. Just do it. Put the time on your calendar. Schedule it for 30 minutes, one day a week that you're going to go and look at YouTube videos or sign up for a class or do something to learn the software better. Regularly evaluate your office procedures. We have a tendency to do things the way we've always done them. The first time when we start a new job, for instance, then we think about, there's probably a better way to do this. I should give this some thought. What's the best way? Maybe it's driving to work. You probably drive to work the exact same way every single day. Is it still the best way to go? When's the last time you actually thought about, is there a better way for me to get to work? Maybe what you have is the best way to get to work, but if you're not stopping and thinking about it periodically, it's perfectly possible new roads could open, shortcuts, lights get added that make one road a better choice than another road. So you need to regularly ask yourself, why am I doing this the way I am? And is there a better way to do this? Maybe 5 years ago, I did it a certain way, and that's how I do it today. But maybe since then, there's new technology that's come out. There's new people that work there. There's new things available. Maybe there's a better way to do it now. And then if you have no intention of saying yes to a request, don't avoid the issue by saying maybe or, well, if I have time, just say no. And don't feel guilty for it either. We, as women in particular, and as administrative professionals in general, we don't like saying no to people. We want to do things that people ask us to do. But sometimes we don't want to do those things. We just don't want to do them. Whether that's serving on a committee or that's helping someone do something or whatever, we don't want to say yes, but we don't want to say no either. But the truth is, you are creating a lot more work for yourself, a lot more drama, and potentially a lot more hard feelings from the other person who thinks that you agreed to say yes when you say, if I have time. And what you mean is, I don't have time. I'm never going to do it. So say what you mean and mean what you say. And if you have no intention of saying yes, then just say no. Don't dance around your answer. Recognize that some time savers are not worth it. Speeding tickets are an easy example. Going faster only to get a speeding ticket will not make you early for a meeting. Creating reference files that will never be used. I used to have a boss who was horrible about turning things around for signature. I created a log to track everything that came across my desk for his signature because it could be in there a day, a week, a month. He would sit on stuff. It would never come back. And people would come to me a week or 2 weeks later and ask me about something, and I wouldn't know if it was in his office or not. So I created this log to track what came in and what came out. Later, I got a new boss, and that new boss was fantastic about turning stuff around as soon as he got it. So literally, pretty much, if he left his office, he carried that folder with and put it on my desk of stuff that he had signed. It didn't sit in his office in general. And if it did, he would usually tell me. But in general, he turned it around immediately. But I didn't stop keeping that log right away. When he first started, I just kept keeping that log up. And then I realized after, thank goodness, not a horribly long period of time, why am I keeping this now? He's really good about turning things around. I don't need to track these items the way I have been. And while, yes, it's nice to be able to say, yes, it was signed on this date and it went back this date, in truth, I know that he's good enough about turning things around that it came back out the same day it came in. I'm making a lot more work for myself by creating a log that I really don't have a need to keep anymore. Look for those kinds of activities too. Things where you've done something for ages, you issue a certain report, you maintain a certain document. Ask yourself regularly, does this still need to be maintained? Is it still necessary? Are people actually reading this? Are people actually using this information? Or am I creating more work for myself than I need to because I'm doing things kind of the way I've always done them, or I'm creating these reference files and I'm actually creating more work for myself than I'm getting value from. Micro-organizing so that things take twice as long. Sometimes good enough is. Sometimes it really is good enough to throw everything into one folder instead of having multiple subfolders for individual topics, depending on what it is. So think carefully, how organized do you need to be? Is it sufficient to have it at, I'll call it level 1, or do I really need to go down to level 5 and have 5 different levels of organization? At some point in time, you're creating so much bureaucracy, everything takes twice as long to do. So don't micro-organize unless there's truly a purpose in doing so. And it really does save you enough time on the back end that the time on the front end is valuable. Bill Gates of Microsoft fame has a quote: the first rule of any technology used in a business is that automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify the efficiency. The second is that automation applied to an inefficient operation will magnify the inefficiency. So think first before you go looking for these ways to streamline and improve and enhance and automate. Am I actually being efficient in the first place? Am I trying to streamline something that in reality I should be eliminating? Am I doing things efficiently or inefficiently? And by making changes to that system, am I just compounding it? So just think carefully about what you're doing, what the value is of it. Look for opportunities to eliminate, to streamline, to redistribute, to delegate, to plan, to structure, to bring change through your choices by advanced organization and advanced planning. There's so much you can do to work more effectively. So I want to thank you all for joining me for this admin chat. If you would like to join my mailing list, you can go to my website, www.mrhenterprises.com. Just scroll down on the homepage and you'll see a sign up for my mailing list. There you can learn about my Certified Administrative Professional and Microsoft Office Specialist study groups. I also offer once a month Advanced Techniques webinars, which are 90-minute long programs focused on Microsoft Office topics. So examples of past webinars that I have done: I did 90 minutes on find and replace in Word. I did 90 minutes on pivot tables in Excel. I've done managing email and calendars and Outlook. So I pick topics that are very small and I focus on them in depth for 90 minutes so that you really learn them inside and out. I also offer 60-minute long Tech Warrior webinars, which are technology but not Microsoft Office. Examples of past webinars have been cloud computing, Windows File Explorer. And so I focus on topics that are valuable for administrative professionals, but go outside the Microsoft Office realm. And then finally, I offer half-day virtual seminars, which are usually 3 to 4 hours long on a Saturday morning for my local time that you can, participate in from the comfort of your own home in your pink bunny slippers if you would like. And these cover different topics. They're usually 3 one-hour topics of a related nature. So change management, strategic planning, project management. I've got one coming up on Ready, Set, Go that covers VIP protocol and setting up large meetings and negotiation skills. So please check them out. See if there's something you're interested in. You can sign up for my mailing list there. And again, I want to thank you for joining me for this Executive Secretary Magazine admin chat. I'm so pleased that I was able to be the host this week. And I hope that you will come back and check out the fabulous speakers that I know they have lined up for the coming weeks. Every single week, this is the place to be at noon on Thursdays, London time, to see the new admin chat with educational topics and great tips to share every single week, week after week, from amazing speakers around the world. I'm so glad you've taken advantage of this opportunity, and I hope you keep doing so every week going forward. Thanks, everyone. Have an awesome